Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work. Afternoon, James.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fabulously, thank you very much. The sun is out, it is a beautiful day.
It's funny how the mood is impacted by the weather.
Absolutely.
And how us British, we always like to talk about the weather.
Yeah, well, it gives us something to talk about. We'd be screwed if it was bright and sunny every day, wouldn't we?
Other than admiring the weather, what have you been up to?
Well, as I told you last time, it was Mrs. Lawther's birthday, so I bought Mrs. Lawther. You know, you give me a hard time about the Volvo being a bit middle class, but I bought Mrs. Lawther a sourdough proving oven. How is that for middle class? I think I have excelled myself.
What on earth is a sourdough proving oven?
It's where you proof your sourdough, isn't it? It's indispensable. That's the word I'm looking for.
Indispensable in your middle class armoury. So you're not even frequenting artisan bakers now. You're doing it yourself.
I have my own artisan baker, and it's all right for you to take the mick, but when she cooks you a loaf and I bring it round, you'll be pleased as punch.
I am definitely willing to be a hypocrite at that point, no doubt.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, I've got to tell you, I had another insurance claim which I haven't bitched about for ages.
Another one?
Yeah. It's for the dog. I'll spare you the details, and I'll spare you the nightmare that you have with automated messages that are constantly trying to close your claim.
Yeah.
And the complaints I've had to have and all the rest of it. I'll just tell you the cherry on top of the issue was when they finally sent me the check after the third time of asking and the third time me sending the invoices in. They sent me the check made out to Bear. That's my dog. They made the check out. The check was handwritten, like they're still handwriting checks. I'm still getting a check, not a bank transfer, to Bear.
To Bear.
He's living his best life now. He's cashed the check. He's living it up. Tell ya.
Couldn't make it up, could you? All right. Anyway, what are we talking about today?
So today we are talking about the challenges in the US. We're jumping on the bandwagon.
We're jumping on the bandwagon. That's a bit of a broad statement. Which particular challenge are we talking about? Are we going to invade Greenland?
Well, we are keeping our political opinions on Greenland and Trump's other escapades. We are limiting it today to DOGE.
Okay.
Or Doggy, as it's known by some people. So the challenge that DOGE are taking on to try and reduce the American federal spending. We are talking about this for a couple of reasons. One, it's in the headlines everywhere.
Yeah.
It is a really extreme way of cutting costs. But costs getting away from you are often a challenge that everyone faces.
Have seen that once or twice.
Perhaps. So we're not going to do a detailed analysis of all DOGE's activities, but we are going to try and learn from them in some instances how not to do things, but also perhaps how you can do things when faced by this sort of challenge.
So we're going to give Elon a masterclass in how to do it. Jolly good. So let's start off then. Explain to me, what is DOGE and what is there and what are they all about then?
So DOGE stands for the Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay.
They were there to implement one aspect of President Trump's agenda, which was to modernise the federal technology and software to maximise government efficiency and productivity. You can tell I've got that from their website.
I thought DOGE originally was an internet meme.
It was.
It was a dodgy-looking dog.
Yeah.
And then you had to have two words in rather poor English in Comic Sans underneath it. Things like mucho spending. That's what DOGE was.
And it then became a cryptocurrency, didn't it? A meme coin.
Oh, did it? You know a lot about cryptocurrency, don't
you?
Jimmy is a crypto billionaire. How much are you worth, mate?
I invested, I think it was $50 in Doge coins.
In Doge coins?
Yes.
And how much are they worth now?
They're now worth $11.25. So that is my crypto fortune. So I am definitely not a crypto billionaire.
Yeah, you're probably best to back away from that, I think. DOGE then. So founded by executive order then. So that was Mr. Trump himself, or sorry, I should say President Trump himself founded it.
Yes. So The reason DOGE was set up, though, was that federal spending has increased by nearly 3 trillion.
Well, before we get into this,
Yeah.
we should just have a little health warning, I think, because I'm not sure our fact checking is as robust as it could be. Because when I look at these numbers, they don't necessarily add up. But go on, tell us what we've got.
I think some of the numbers are pretty clear. Some of them are incredibly opaque, and you'll find lots of different answers. But federal spending has gone up by 3 trillion. It's gone up from just over 4 trillion to about 7 trillion.
And when you say gone up, since when?
Since pre-pandemic, so since 2019.
Okay.
Now, if you bear in mind, we're talking about trillions, right? I've just about got my head around a billion. A trillion is actually 1,000 billion.
Yeah, or a million. Bit quick maths there.
Yeah, well,
it's a reasonable amount of money.
This is why you're the analyst. It is also, it's more than the UK GDP, so the entire economy in this country. So it's a big number. And aside from all of the conspiracy theories, I think you can say it's an issue. And Elon has very publicly said on many occasions he's going to save $1 trillion.
How is he saving this money then? What's his approach?
They're looking at things like staff costs, contracts the government has, how you use tech enablement, and individual fraud as well.
Okay. So there's a lot of talk about staff costs. We'll come on to that, and contracts. But the other two sound a bit suspicious to me. What's the real story there?
Well, I think you're right, James. Staff costs and contracts often form the largest part of any organisation's cost base. Tech enablement is what they were supposedly set up to do.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of talk around the actual tech enablement. And fraud is creating a huge amount of the heat and light in this, because in order to assess individual fraud, they're asking for lots of personal data. And of course, people don't want to give up their personal data. So that's resulting in all sorts of lawsuits. He's trying to save a lot of money off this cost base. If you took it as $1 trillion off 7, it's 14%. Yeah.
So, having worked in local government, I can sure you could get 14% of efficiencies out. Yeah. But it's not quite that straightforward, is it? Because it's not 14%.
No. Actually, if you look at what's fixed, the 3.8 of it is fixed mandatory spending, which you can't actually impact. So things like social care and Medicare, debt repayments. So you're getting into trying to save almost probably $1 trillion out of 3. So a third plus. That's an ask, that is. You are going to be cutting deep.
Yeah,
cutting deep. And that's why some of the activities seem to be really extreme in terms of virtually shutting down whole departments, making large-scale layoffs, moving very fast, but creating lots of heat and light, so lots of legal challenges. And funny enough, lots of noise around the savings they're already making. They're claiming to have saved $100 billion already.
How much of that could they evidence then?
Well, they've got a website where they're putting everything up. The Wall Street Journal had done their own independent analysis, and they said it was sub 5 billion, so a fraction of that.
I think they're making a lot of these numbers up. So one of the largest savings they talked about was a Treasury Department contract, which was £1.9 billion, which they'd slashed. But actually, that was cancelled a year earlier under Joe Biden. So I think a lot of this is smoke and mirrors.
Oh yeah, I mean there was at one point on their wall of receipts, they were claiming an $8 billion saving. Well, actually, the contract was only $8 million. It was a typo. So
a bit unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah, just a bit.
So that's like a typo to the tune of 3 zeros on the end then, is that what?
Yeah, usually people get 1 zero extra.
Okay, so we're a bit sceptical about it. Has Mr. Musk got previous experience of this then? If organisations I've seen doing this before, they do bring people in who have got experience and know what they're doing.
The premise of taking capacity out of a system does sometimes work. It seems like that's what he did with Twitter. Yeah. So at Twitter, he cut 80% of the workforce almost straight away.
From what I've read, he's using exactly the same approach. The letter that he sent to all employees is pretty much the same letter he used in Twitter.
Yeah, he's got a playbook. This is how he did it. And is Twitter better off than it was?
Well, and there's a really interesting thing because clearly it's a lot cheaper to run,
Yeah.
but arguably it is no longer the same organisation at all.
No, and they are doing something completely different from the days of sharing what you're up to or what your opinions were or the latest things that are happening. It may well be more powerful as in terms of impacting elections and the like, but as a force for good, I think there would be only one answer you'd come up with that. But again,
but hang on, sorry, but there is a very valid point there then, isn't it? Which is if you're going to save money, that's great, but what is the outcome you're looking for? What is the purpose of the organisation? Because if you're changing that, is that legitimate or not?
Yeah, and it does appear that he has changed the purpose as well as the name of Twitter to become X.
X. Interestingly, actually, X. Very macho, isn't it? Have you seen the DOGE logo?
It's all macho bullshit,
It's all
James.
macho.
Come on.
Yeah, okay, go on. Oh, it's got a very nice chrome chainsaw.
So, should we just, for a second, put aside any feelings that we have of Elon?
Yeah.
There are actually some positives about the approach of Doge.
Tell me, see if you can convince me.
I'm not sure I'll convince you, but there is a burning platform and the numbers are compelling in terms of doing something, and the stated aim to use technology to try and help improve the government's performance, at that level, it makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things we quote on this podcast regularly is progress, not perfection. Well, he hasn't waited to get the perfect answer.
He's definitely got progress.
Yeah. As I say, taking capacity out of a system. Systems are often very adaptable, and if you remove some of the capacity, then quite often the system will adapt.
Well, it forces people to act, yes.
If one of the things that they've done, which has caused all sorts of angst and issues, is they have sent an email to all federal employees and told them they've got to reply with what are the 5 things they've achieved in the last week. Which
I hear he got some rather rude responses.
It did. And now I'm talking about this under the positives, James. But
okay.
The reality is, if you are sitting there at the end of the week and just thinking back and reflecting about what you've achieved in the week, that's probably a positive thing to do.
Yeah.
The issue
as an individual level, yes.
At an individual level, just thinking about what have I achieved is good. The issue here is, A, they're doing it across everyone. B, they've then said, if you don't, you're effectively resigning. And
well, you might get the sack.
Somewhat sacked, I think.
Somewhat sacked, was that the phrase? Yeah,
I think that's what Trump said. You'd be somewhat sacked.
You're somewhat sacked.
And every department has interpreted that differently. Some say, yes, you've got to do this. Other departments, like the FBI, have said, no, you don't need to do this.
Presumably, because if you work for the FBI, you're probably somewhat sacked already. Is that the problem?
Could be. There are some things that I think you could argue at a principle level might be sensible. But...
Okay. However...
James, I know you want to talk about the reasons why this is not a good approach. So kick us off. The show you're listening to right now brings you insights to help you improve performance and enjoyment of work.
It takes a long time to produce, but we think it's well worth it. It's all in the name of helping you getting the job done well.
All we ask in return is that you share the link to this show with someone that you think would benefit from it. And if you haven't already, click on follow the show wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
I did listen to a very interesting podcast called The Rest is Classified, which is worth a listen. And they were talking about this, but they were talking about this in the context of the CIA. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't know anything about the CIA. But I thought what they said was quite interesting because it kind of pulls out the risks. And for me, the risk is it's all about the human in the machine. And if you want the organisation to work well, then you need to look after the people. So one thing that I think they have done very well is, if what you read is to believe, a lot of the people who've been told that they can take voluntary redundancy have been told they'll get 8 months' worth of severance. Now, I don't know about you, of the 6 organisations...
There are very few jobs I've had that I wouldn't be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of signing up for a job right now to see if I can get me 8 months. On those grounds, I think actually you're treating people pretty well. However, it's not quite that straightforward. One of the groups of people that they are not giving those 8 months worth of severance to are people on probation. So what does probation mean? Well, those are people who've just transferred jobs or have had less than 1 year in the job or have recently been promoted. And that's a bit of a blanket cut on anybody who's on probation. But actually, if you think about that, so what you're going to do is you're going to sack everybody who's just been promoted, or you're going to sack everybody you've just recruited into the organisation because you think they're talent. So from a talent perspective, that really does sound terribly dubious to me.
It's a real blunt instrument, this is.
Right, so there's the first. The second one, which I think was just interesting, they were talking, as I said, they were talking about the CIA, but...
Yeah.
So, well, if you were, let's just hypothesize, a member of the Chinese secret police or whatever the hell they call themselves, and you wanted to find yourself somebody who was fairly disaffected, who had previously had security clearance in the US government, then it wouldn't be too difficult to go on LinkedIn and find a whole host of people who've got a big axe to grind about the organisation. Personally, there are 2 or 3 people in my career who I've got a bit of a grudge against, and if I got the opportunity, I would gladly stick the knife in. But when you're making this many people redundant, you are opening yourself up to a huge amount of risk. So that's my second point.
I said that they were working at pace and, progress, not perfection. You're going to make some mistakes. But Elon has actually held his hands up to that fact and says that when they make a mistake, they'll put it right. And the example that he gave, which has been widely reported on, is he said, we shut down the Ebola program. Funny enough that we probably want to have people working on control and management and cure of Ebola.
Yeah.
And he accepted that. So we put the program back in. Except they didn't.
They didn't. Yeah.
So
another one I heard on that grounds, apparently there were some nuclear power station safety people that they sacked, who they allegedly have brought back in. Because that's what you need, a load of people who are really pissed off who work in nuclear safety.
Well, I think also the other thing is that a blanket, everyone's going to save this. Everyone's got to save 20%, but it doesn't allow for variances within those different areas, does it?
No, not at all. Anyway, coming back to my CIA story, because it's quite interesting, the next risk they called out was disaffected partners. So if you are sharing intelligence and you end up pissing off the people that you're sharing intelligence with, what is the implication of that? Now, okay, we don't all share intelligence, but you do run the risk of pissing your customers off something rotten if you take this approach. So there was the third risk. And then the other 2 risks which they called out, which I thought were really quite interesting. The first one is if you scare a lot of people, then you will get poor performance because they'll be too busy worrying about their jobs or updating their CVs or whatever the hell it is that they're doing to do their jobs.
Coming up, in fact, in the next few weeks, we have got an episode on fear at work where we cover exactly that, but rule by fear, and you'll see what you get.
Absolutely. A linked point is actually, what is it like if you are in the group that's remaining? Because you've just seen this massive cull. Well, you're probably still going to be scared. And that's a real cause of groupthink. Maybe you just don't tell Donald the things that he doesn't want to hear. But of course, you see group things in all sorts of organisations. So there's another aspect of fear. So I think there are a whole host of risks associated with taking this approach. A bit more Elon bashing just because I'm in the mood here.
You're on a roll.
I am. His analysts, this is fascinating. You need to Google DOGE kids. Who are these young whiz kids who are going into these organisations? One of them, and I'll only pick on one of them has got a small business, and in this business he hosts websites. Amongst the websites that he hosts are children-sex.party and, if that's not bad enough, kkiscool.club. Now, we can have a conversation about whether or not woke is a good thing or not. I do think the pendulum has swung maybe just a little bit too far the other direction with those boys. Well, so really, have you got the skills that you need, or have you just got a group of people who are agreeing with your approach? There is a bit of a silver lining, though.
Oh, yeah,
apparently, there is a anti-Tesla group which was sprung forward in the US and also in the UK and across Europe. But the song of the moment is Elon Musk can go to Mars. We don't want your Nazi cars, which I thought was very funny.
Elon's got his own song.
Well, absolutely.
In fairness, though, I am.
You used to own a Tesla, didn't you?
Yeah, up until
no more taking the piss out of my Volvo, will you?
No, and now we're looking at what car we get next. And the one thing we've been clear of, I loved my Tesla for a drive. I will never buy another Tesla.
Maybe Elon would have saved more money if he'd just taken the amount of money he's lost on Tesla shares and bunged that at the American government instead.
So it's easy to do Elon bashing, and we've tried to bring out potentially some of the principles that were positive. But James, what's a better way of doing this?
Well, the first really smug answer, and probably not very helpful, but is not getting to that situation in the first place. So I've seen time and time again people going for growth and building capability and building capacity, and it invariably ends in tears. So not very helpful now because they are in this position, but really think very carefully before you do go for that capacity build. My first point.
Very, very true. Proactively. But when we're in it, what's a better way of actually getting yourself out of it?
So the first thing for me really is focus on purpose and service rather than cost.
Yeah.
So bizarrely, if you're really clear about what it is you're there to deliver, and you deliver only that, your costs will fall. But it's about being clear what you're there to deliver.
Often in service organisations, and I would argue that large parts of the US government are service organisations.
Yeah.
If you focus on getting it right for your customers, your costs will fall as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The second thing I think is really stand back and look at what the opportunities are for improvement. Now, I know they're doing some of this with their DOGE kids. I do question how much Mr. KKK is going after. But what do your customers think? What's the data tell you? What, very important, what do the employees think? Because they understand how things work. Go and have a look. What exactly is going on? That time taken understanding how the system is working is all important if you want to make the system work more effectively.
There are multiple lenses that you look at. You don't just sit a bunch of analysts in a darkened room with some data and they'll tell you all the answers. That's only part of the answer.
Absolutely. There were, interestingly, a bunch of Democratic senators who signed up to be part of the DOGE initiative and had a whole host of ideas of things that they could do. For example, reducing subsidies on fossil fuels or moving locations out of Washington, D.C. to places where it's cheaper. But they all got a good stiff ignoring.
I think that also raises an interesting point, James, which is this will all become incredibly political. So the politics will be, I've got the right answer, you've got the wrong answer, don't listen to the Democrats. The whole politics around the data and the numbers, and is it 110 billion or is it 1 billion? How much we saved? All of that heat and light around disagreement, politics, data, telling stories doesn't save you a penny.
Yeah, not helpful. In fact, worse than doesn't save you a penny. The next thing is about creating an environment for success. How do you get everybody engaged and pushing this way? Now, I know there is more to it than just money, but actually, if you're going to get sack people, giving them 8 months worth of money is actually a very positive place to be. I've been places where you get statutory minimum. How else are you creating that environment where people feel that they're being listened to and are being given opportunities?
Yeah, and communicated to, treated with respect. Then people will help you, and when they move on, they'll move on as advocates rather than being alienated and either not helping you solve the problem or, as you say, God knows what some of these people will do when they've left.
And I know you don't like it much, but actually I'm a big fan of, if you really do have to take cost out, put in a hiring freeze rather than going around sacking people. But be explicit about it, because at least that way people know that they've got a job and the costs will come down because you have attrition.
I'm not always convinced by a hiring freeze. I think it assumes you've got the resource in the right place. But yeah, it's definitely a less blunt instrument than just pure sacking.
Another one, which we kind of touched on, but just honesty. So being very clear about what is happening, what your successes are, what your failures are, and pony up to what the results are. The whole smoke and mirror about the wall of receipts is not helping the situation at all. Yeah. And then the final one for me, which is interesting because if you read the presidential decree or whatever they call it, DOGE was set up for, but it's all about building capability. So the technology should, amongst other things, should have helped, but it doesn't seem to be that's the way that they're going. How would you summarise that then? What would our advice to Elon be?
Well, I think the need for savings is pretty generally agreed, and the intent behind some of the stuff that they're talking about i.e. tech enablement, is a sensible approach.
Yeah.
But
And he's got his stakeholders lined up as well. President Trump seems to be there too.
he's got a strong sponsor.
Strong sponsor, yeah.
However,
What is the outcome that you're searching for? And maybe this is the outcome they're searching for. And then the second thing is you really do have to bring the people with you and not scare the bejesus out of them. Because if you want to do that, you will fail.
I guess the angle we wanted to take is there is a better way of doing it. And if you face cost challenges in your organisation, which you probably will at some point, listen to our way rather than Elon's. I guess what we're saying is...
Good luck, Elon. Right. Shall we email this to him directly then?
All right.
Anyway,
Thanks,
on
everyone.
those words of wisdom, speak to you later. Cheers now.
Cheers.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
From purpose to corporate jargon.
but always focused on one thing, getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
If your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiralling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com.
or James at jobdonewell.com.